ดี๋ยวนะคุณอ๋อเดี๋ยวไม่ทันแน่แบบ
or get your head together, whether you're a president or a great athlete or anything. So it's a tremendous privilege to have him here. And with us also is the head of our biofund, Dr. Vijay Pandey, who will be very helpful, as Tony's last book is a book called Life Force, which is a book all about regenerative medicine and how to basically live your best, healthiest life with the best health span possible. So with that, welcome, Tony.
Well, thank you. Thank you for such a nice introduction. As I said before we got on, you guys are the legends here. I'm so grateful to have an opportunity to visit with you. What you've created around the world, the kinds of companies you guys help and support is super inspiring. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
คนอื่น
So
เข้าใจ
we'll just start just a little with, you have this great story that kind of led to your
ต้อง
book
ฟังเขาได้ดี
and led to your kind of work
ถ้าพูดเร็วแล้วก็เสียงเขาแหบ
โท
where
นี่
you had a snowboarding
แต่เขาเป็น
accident.
นักพูดสร้างแรงบันดาลใจที่เก่งที่สุดในโลก
You know,
ว่า
kind of
แล้ว
following you over the
พอถึง
years.
แหบพูดเย
A
อะ
lot of
เขาอก
where
เขาใหญ่อะ
kind of some of your best work comes
เขา
from
พูด
is your
กับ
worst
คนเป็นห
moment. So
มื่น
maybe
ๆคนอ่ะ
you can talk a little bit
ว่า
about
แล้ว
how
เสียง
that
ถึง
happened
เป็น
here.
อย่างนี้ใช้เสียง
ตอนหนุ่มๆไม่ใช่อย่างนี้นะตอนหนุ่มๆเสียงเขาไม่ใช่อย่างนี้
นั่นแหละเขาพูดเยอะ
for 3.5 years by work with Tom Brady and
อันนี้เขาจะเข้า70อ่ะเนี่ย
and they were tracking my body and you know I do these
ใช้
events
เสียง
that
ตั้
are
งแต่
4 to
แดกจะไร
7 days and I've
เสียง
got
ก็เลย
15,000 people in the stadium and I got to hold the person at the top for 12 hours, not a 2-hour movie.
เข้าใจเยอะแบบผู้ใหญ่ถูก
to make, so it's just
ใช่
me.
เขา70
So the amount of energy running around the building, going up, engaging people is amazing. I burn 11,300 calories on average, believe it or not, every single time on a single day. I jump 1,000 times. I weigh 290 pounds. So every time you come down, your body hits 4 times the body weight. So imagine a million jumps, you know, 1,000,000 pounds of pressure, I should say, 1,000 times 1,000 happens in a day. So as a result of all that, I'm always looking for breakthroughs. But I'm also a little crazy, and I was following one day a 20-year-old snowboarder down the hill, and I did not have their moves. And I discovered that the hard way. And I woke up having taken a jump, and I thought I broke my neck. But I tore my rotator cuff severely. And the nerve pain from that, if you've ever experienced this, is
ใน
pretty
เน็ต
brutal.
นะ
So, you know, I own pieces of several sports teams, fortunately. We have some of the best doctors in the world, both the Dodgers and the Warriors. And so it's like, okay, what should I do, doc? And every single one of them surgery. And they're like, okay, what's the prognosis? Well, it's between 3 and 6 months of rehab, and it can happen again. And I said, what about stem cells? Because, you know, I've been reading about stem cells and hearing about them like
Hello, health champions. Today we're going to talk about the top 10 signs that your diet is silently destroying your health. And I'm saying silently because a lot of these are going to be a little more subtle than what people... Hello, health champions. What would happen if you only ate meat for 30 days? Well, there's this thing called a carnivore diet, and a lot of people are getting very interested in that because people are reporting health benefits. So they say that they've had weight loss plateaus that finally break through. They have gut issues that resolve, skin issues that resolve. Even severe things like rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory
นี่
joint
แค่น้ำผ่านแล้ว
pain,
นะครับ
autoimmune diseases tend to improve. People also say that their mood improves, their anxiety and depression decreases. But then on the other hand, there are people who say meat, absolutely not. It causes inflammation, it's full of saturated fat, it will raise your triglycerides, it will move you closer to cardiovascular disease and cancer and type 2 diabetes. They're saying that everything that's wrong with you is because you eat too much meat. And most regulatory agencies around the world, including the USDA, say that you should increase your fruits and vegetables. You should eat so many every day, but meat you should eat rarely, especially red meat. And the meat you should eat should be mostly chicken and fish and lean sources of meat. And of course they say to avoid saturated fat. So how can we have two camps that are so diametrically opposed? In this video, we will try to clear up some of the confusion and we will answer some of these questions about meat. Is it harmful? In the people that have noticed benefits, why is it that it is helpful? Why are they getting these benefits? And if you're considering trying the carnivore diet, then we want to understand who are the people who might benefit. The next question is, if we find that we get these benefits and we get healthier than we have been, does that mean that this is optimal? Is this the best diet for everybody or even for you in the long term? And then of course, if we try this, how long might we want to try it? Is it a temporary thing or is it forever? The most common objection to the carnivore diet is that if you only eat one thing, you're too limited. You will develop deficiencies. You can't get all your nutrients from one thing. And when it comes to vitamins and minerals, we're always told that they come from fruits and vegetables. And while that is true, fruits and vegetables contain a lot of vitamins and minerals, that does not mean that meat doesn't have any. And meat actually has plenty if you eat enough. So we're not talking about eating a 4-ounce steak anymore. We're talking about eating all your calories from meat. And also, you're not going to overload on protein, because if you eat meat that has 15 to 20% fat, which is recommended, then you will get the vast majority of calories from fat. And if you eat 2 pounds of meat, this is about 1 kilo, or if you're a little bit bigger, you might eat 3 pounds, which is 1.5 kilos, then it turns out you get about 60% of your thiamine, which is a B vitamin. The other B vitamins you get between 150 to 920% of the RDA, which is recommended daily allowance. The potassium, which is a mineral, you get over 100%, you get 120% of the recommended daily allowance. Magnesium, you get 75%. Iron, you get 200. And vitamin C, you still get 30%. So we're often told that meat has no vitamin C. That's not true. Even regular steak has some vitamin C. And if you add in a little bit of organ meat like liver, then you quickly get up to 100% of the RDA, even for something like vitamin C. Now, if you're observant, you're going to notice that some of these numbers still don't get up to 100%. Like thiamine's only 60, magnesium's only 75. But what happens is the body uses nutrients more efficiently. For example, with vitamin C, it competes with glucose for the transport mechanism. So the more glucose you eat, the less efficient your vitamin C is. When you cut back on carbs and glucose, then you can use your vitamin C more efficiently. And the same holds true for thiamine and magnesium, because people who go carnivore, they tend to not have deficiency. They don't get scurvy. They don't seem to have any low levels of these nutrients either. The other aspect of deficiency is that we don't actually know what the RDA is. The recommended daily allowance was developed And they based that on synthetic isolates. They did not base that on nutrients from food. They didn't conduct experiments with people and food. They used synthetic isolates from pharmaceutical companies, developed certain chemicals that were equivalent to vitamins, and then they tested them on mice in animal studies. So they took different groups of mice, they fed them a very, very deficient diet. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't real food. It was maybe just glucose. So they made sure that they were very, very deficient. Then one group, they added in some of these synthetic isolated vitamins, and they noticed what were the differences in the two groups. And the one that didn't get any vitamins, they got a bunch. Carnivore diet, and a lot of people are getting very interested in that because people are reporting health benefits. So they say that they've had weight loss plateaus that finally break through. They have gut issues that resolve, skin issues that resolve, even severe things like rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory joint pain, autoimmune diseases tend to improve. People also say that their mood improves, their anxiety and depression decreases. But then on the other hand, there are people who say, meat, absolutely not. It causes inflammation, it's full of saturated fat, it will raise your triglycerides, it will move you closer to cardiovascular disease and cancer, type 2 diabetes. They're saying that everything is wrong with you is because you eat too much meat. And most regulatory agencies around the world, including the USDA, say that you should increase your fruits and vegetables, you should eat so many every day, but meat you should eat rarely, especially red meat. And the meat you should eat should be mostly chicken and fish and lean sources of meat. And of course they say to avoid saturated fat. So how can we have two camps that are so diametrically opposed? In this video we will try to clear up some of the confusion, and we will answer some of these questions about meat. Is it harmful? In the people that have noticed benefits, why is it that it is helpful? Why are they getting these benefits? And if you're considering trying the carnivore diet, then we want to understand who are the people who might benefit. The next question is, if we find that we get these benefits and we get healthier than we have been, does that mean that this is optimal? Is this the best diet for everybody or even for you in the long term? And then of course, if we try this, how long might we want to try it? Is it a temporary thing or is it forever? The most common objection to the carnivore diet is that if you only eat one thing, you're too limited. You will develop deficiencies. You can't get all your nutrients from one thing. And when it comes to vitamins and minerals, we're always told that they come from fruits and vegetables. And while that is true, fruits and vegetables contain a lot of vitamins and minerals, that does not mean that meat doesn't have any. And meat actually has plenty if you eat enough. So we're not talking about eating a 4-ounce steak anymore. We're talking about eating all your calories from meat. And also, you're not going to overload on protein, because if you eat meat that has 15 to 20% fat, which is recommended, then you'll get the vast majority of calories from fat. And if you eat 2 pounds of meat, it's about 1 kilo, or if you're a little bit bigger, you might eat 3 pounds, which is 1.5 kilos, then it turns out you get about 60% of your thiamine, which is a B vitamin. The other B vitamins you get between 150 to 920% of the RDA, which is recommended daily allowance. The potassium, which is a mineral, you get over 100%, you get 120% of the recommended daily allowance. Magnesium, you get 75%. Iron, you get 200, and vitamin C, you still get 30%. So we're often told that meat has no vitamin C. That's not true. Even regular steak has some vitamin C, and if you add in a little bit of organ meat like liver, then you quickly get up to 100% of the RDA, even for something like vitamin C. Now, if you're observant, you're going to notice that some of these numbers still don't get up to 100%. Like thiamin's only 60, magnesium's only 75. But what happens is the body uses nutrients more efficiently. For example, with vitamin C, it competes with glucose for the transport mechanism. So the more glucose you eat, the less efficient your vitamin C is. When you cut back on carbs and glucose, then you can use your vitamin C more efficiently. And the same holds true for thiamine and magnesium, because people who go carnivore, they tend to not have deficiency. They don't get scurvy. They don't seem to have any low levels have deficiency. They don't get scurvy. People who go carnivore, they tend to not have deficiency. They don't get scurvy. They don't seem to have any low level, not have deficiency. They don't get scurvy. They don't seem to have any low levels of these nutrients either. The other aspect of deficiency is that we don't actually know what the RDA is. The recommended daily allowance was developed, and they based that on synthetic isolates. They did not base that on nutrients from food. They didn't conduct experiments with people and food. They used synthetic isolates from pharmaceutical companies, developed certain chemicals that were equivalent to vitamins, and then they tested them on mice in animal studies. So they took different groups of mice, they fed them a very, very deficient diet. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't real food. It was maybe just glucose. So they made sure that they were very, very deficient. Then one group, they added in some of these synthetic isolated vitamins, and they noticed what were the differences in the two groups. And the one that didn't get any vitamins, they got a bunch of deficiency diseases. Then they added back in synthetic isolates until those deficiencies went away. And they figured out this is how much you need to not get sick. And then they extrapolated those numbers to humans, and they figured out what the RDA is. So we're assuming that isolates work the same as food, and we're assuming that mice work the same as humans. We don't really know. But what turns out is that people on the carnivore diet tend to do really well, even when they measure the levels for these nutrients. And why would there be such a big difference between a whole food nutrient and a synthetic isolate? Well, the whole food has complexes. And think of that, the nutrients being complex, think of that as an old-fashioned clock. If we open up the back of an old clock when they were mechanical, when they had hundreds of little mechanical pieces, then they all work together. We have all these different springs and screws and levers and cogwheels, and when they're assembled correctly and we tighten the spring and we set the clock appropriately, now that clock can keep time. But the question is, which part is it that keeps the time? Which is the most important part that can tell us what time it is? And the question is obviously ridiculous, because a single piece doesn't do anything by itself. It's the pieces together. They work as a complex. They work together. And so it is with food as well. We can't pick one piece and say that this is the thing that does the work when they all depend on other pieces. So the RDA, I wouldn't say it's useless, but it's in a very rough approximation. The truth is we don't really know what those numbers are. And finally, the proof is in the pudding, as they say. What does that mean? Well, if we're wondering if they get deficient, then let's just take a bunch of carnivores and see if they did get deficient. And we had tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or maybe more carnivores who have performed this experiment on themselves, and they tend to get healthier, not sicker. They don't develop scurvy. They have very, very few symptoms. Actually, they mostly reverse the symptoms they had. And we want to keep in mind, these are people who have pretty much tried everything. In my experience, they don't go straight to the carnivore diet. They don't go straight from standard American with orange juice and bread and candy and soda and hamburgers to say, I'm going to go carnivore. There are lots of steps along the way, which we'll also talk about. So if these people who were not very healthy to start with, their bodies were not working very well, if they can manage on this diet, then maybe it's not so bad. And one more objection is fiber, because meat has no fiber by definition. And this is very controversial because traditionally we're of the opinion that fiber is necessary for bowel movement. Fiber traditionally is looked at as the only thing that provides volume to your stool, to your bowel movement. So without fiber, there would be nothing to move through, no bowel movement. But then on the other hand, now there's research that suggests, based on studying a bunch of carnivores, that maybe zero fiber is better. That in some studies they say that they have the best bowel movement of anybody. So we have research that is very, very conflicting. In my experience, and I have a lot of carnivore people in my office, I find that some of them notice some problems with constipation. For the most part, it's temporary. And on the other hand, there are lots of people who are not carnivore who also have a lot of problems with constipation, but most of them do really well. Now let's talk about why it might help and who might it help. And in order to understand that, let's go over a little scenario. That most people are not going to change anything until they feel really bad. They need to be sick. They need to want to improve something before they change for most people. So if they're sick and sad, or sick because they eat the standard American diet, sad, then what is the first thing that they'll probably change? Most people are going to hear, then what is the first thing that they'll probably change? Most people are going to hear the mainstream advice first. So they hear, eat more fruits and vegetables. So they try that. Maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't. Then someone says, you got to cut out some of the junk food. You can't eat all that white bread and all that sugar and all that fried food. So they cut that out. Maybe they're better, maybe not. Next, someone says you're eating too many carbohydrates. You got to go low carb, high fat, or the ketogenic diet. And if that doesn't work, you need to eat fewer meals. You need to have longer fasting periods called intermittent fasting, which we talk a lot about on this channel. They try that, and by now, most people are going to feel a lot better. The vast majority of people will have resolved their problems. But what if you haven't? Now it's not just a matter of junk food and your basic metabolic issue. Now it's a little more detailed, and this is still pretty common. So now you might go keto paleo, that you cut most of the carbs out, but not just that, you also start cutting out all the dairy. You cut the cheese, the cream, the milk, you cut out even some of the vegetables that might irritate you. And if that helps, great. If not, now the next step would be an autoimmune diet. So now you start looking at the nitty-gritty. What are some of these plants? They might contain various compounds like lectin, and you cut those out. So these are people, they try many, many different things, and it's usually kind of a last resort to go carnivore. And if you think about this now, why would that work as the last resort? Because it is essentially the ultimate elimination diet. You cut out everything until there's just one food left. You, all the way along the way, you eliminate various different things. You start with the really bad stuff like sugar, and then you fine-tune it and you tweak it until you don't even have the leafy greens anymore. You just eat one food. And what meat has going for it is that it's basically the most neutral food there is. The lowest number of allergies to any food is probably meat. And while there are poisons, while there are toxic substances like plutonium and arsenic and things like that, most of the problems caused is not by the substance itself, it is your body's reaction to it. When your body responds because it recognizes it as an enemy, it's going to create inflammation, and it's that inflammation that causes all the problems. And meat being the most neutral food there is, it's the least amount of responses, the least amount of probable inflammation. The only people who have any trouble with meat is if they don't have enough stomach acid to digest it. And then you could just add a little bit of hydrochloric acid and you'll probably be fine. And I hope now it starts to make sense why these people get the problems and why they can be relieved. If someone has a weight loss plateau that they can't break through, well, the carnivore diet is a zero-carb diet. It is a low-carb, high-fat diet. And not only that, but if it can lower the immune reactions, because you've eliminated everything else that causes an immune reaction and inflammation, if inflammation goes down, then there is less tendency toward insulin resistance, because inflammation is a significant driver of insulin resistance. If you have intestinal issues, digestive or other gut issues, it's probably because you're eating something that causes irritation, that causes an immune reaction, more inflammation, or maybe you're just feeding the wrong kind of bacteria to upset your microbiome. That can also lead to leaky gut. If you have leaky gut, you can get skin problems because some of the particles get through the gut lining that shouldn't, causing further widespread inflammation and immune reactions. And of course, that's also associated with autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, because you have hypersensitivity reactions to things that get out of the gut into the bloodstream, into places they don't belong. And it's the same thing again with mood and anxiety and depression. We have to understand how important that digestive tract is. We have barriers. We have an intestinal lining barrier and we have a blood-brain barrier. If one barrier gets compromised, it's very likely the other will get compromised.
Hello everyone, nice to meet you. Compromise.
So if you have inflammatory reactions in the gut, you will most likely have inflammatory reactions in the brain as well, leading to anxiety, depression, and less function in the brain overall. But what is it about plants that could be so bad for some people? Well, the question is, who wants to get eaten? Well, I certainly don't. So I can move, I can defend myself, but plants can't do that. So they have basically two defenses. One would be like this cactus, to have really, really nasty thorns, but the other solution is chemical warfare. That if the plant can't defend itself any other way, then it has to start making some poison, something that makes it unattractive for something else to eat it. So plants have things like lectins and oxalates and phytates and gliadins and saponins, and some people don't seem to have much of a reaction, while others have devastating reactions. The idea of hormesis is one more piece that can help us understand why people might be so different in the responses to this. So the idea of hormesis is that if we get a really small dose of something that could be harmful, then that small dose, first of all, does no harm, but it could actually be beneficial. So that's kind of the idea behind homeopathics, for example. They give you a tiny, tiny dose of some toxin or something that could be harmful, but because it's so tiny, it just sort of provokes your body a little bit, and your body mounts a response that makes it stronger. And some argue that this is what happens with these plant compounds, that if we start off with a zero dose, then it's a zero response, but as we increase the dose, then we actually get a benefit up to a certain point where we get the maximum benefit. Now if we increase the dose, we still have some benefit but less benefit until we hit a threshold where there again is no benefit, no harm. But if we go even just a little bit above that, now this compound becomes toxic and we have a reaction. Now how does that help us understand? Well, some people might have this kind of picture, but since humans are all different, another person might have this kind of picture. So for this person, this much of a toxin could be beneficial, whereas for this person, just a tiny little bit would be beneficial, and they could only tolerate about half the dose. And if that's the case, then surely there must be some people who get hypersensitive, and they can tolerate zero. As soon as they encounter any amount and they can tolerate zero. As soon as they encounter any amount of that toxin or that chemical, they have a harmful reaction. But how do you know then if carnivore diet is for you? Well, if you have severe bloating, if you have frequent bloating, your stomach gets really upset, like this kitty here, he looks pretty bloated to me. Maybe someone gave him some grain or something else he's not supposed to eat. Cats are obligate carnivores. If that's you, then you might be a good candidate. Also, if you have SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth, then you have bacteria growing in the small intestine where they don't belong. And if you stop feeding them what they like, which is carbohydrate and fiber, then they're going to have less to eat and most of them will go away. If you have irritable bowel syndrome, which doesn't point to any specific mechanism, it just says irritable bowel, it's very upset, you have alternate mechanism. It just says irritable bowel, it's very upset, you have alternating constipation, diarrhea, it's a mess, then that might be a good thing to try the carnivore. Or if you have, for example, leaky gut, inflammation, skin rashes, if you have autoimmune conditions like Hashimoto's thyroiditis, if you're hypothyroid, most of that is autoimmune. If you have rheumatoid arthritis or lupus, you have a lot of inflammation, a lot of reactions in your body. Or if you're just highly sensitive, if you seem to react to just about anything you put into your body, then what do you have to lose? Carnivore might be the thing that will sort of calm the fire and take care of this for you. So does that mean that all humans should eat nothing but meat for the rest of our lives? Well, humans have this tendency to go all or nothing. We divide ourselves up in groups, in political parties, and everything that the other party says is wrong. And then on the diet front, we have the vegan versus the carnivore that virtually become religions. They believe so strongly in what they're doing. And I think that's taking it a bit too far. So is carnivore optimal? That's the next question. We know that it can help a lot of people who haven't been helped before, but does that mean everyone should eat it? When we look at where humans have been all over the planet during our history, and when we look at the different sources of food that we've been hunter-gatherers, we've been farming, we've been fishing, and in all of those areas, humans have done really well. I think it's going too far to say that we should either be all vegan or all carnivore. Just like some vegans tend to be really healthy, at least for a while, and a lot of carnivores turn around disease, at least for a while, the jury is still out on what happens for the rest of your life, but I think there's a good chance that you can probably do it for the rest of your life. But even if you can, I don't think that it's necessarily the best thing forever. I think that there is something to be said for variety. I think your microflora tends to be more
microflora
varied, and I believe that is a good thing if you eat a more varied food. So I would suggest that if you have any of the problems that we discussed here, then I would suggest, I don't think you have anything to lose really, is to do 30 days. Or maybe start with a week and just see how it goes, and if you're okay, then do 30 days and see how you feel. And if most of your problems are gone, then maybe you want to go a little longer, maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months. However, in my opinion, in my experience, I think that it would be better to add in some variety over time. And I don't know this for sure. This is based on my knowledge and my clinical experience, that I think variety in the long run is a little bit more optimal. So then, if you're feeling a whole lot better, then
ไปไหนกันเธอ
try some very neutral plants, some things that you believe would be well tolerated. And if you do well, then you try a little bit more. If you feel worse, then maybe you are someone who would do well to stay on carnivore. If you enjoyed this video, you're going to love that one. And if you truly want to master health by... Hello, health champions. Today I'm going to talk about what would happen if you only slept 4 hours per night for 30 nights. Well, if you're like me, then you probably lost some sleep from time to time. But the good news is, if it only happens once in a while, then we will have full recovery. There's no permanent damage from that. But what I want to teach today, what I want you to understand is that the chronicity is the problem. That if we have chronic lack of sleep, now we get chronic damage. And in some cases, that can be long-lasting. It might be able to reverse it, but it would be difficult. But in some ways, we also get some permanent or irreversible damage. So we'll talk about all of that. And the next question I get, of course, is how many hours of sleep do I need? And it's not such an easy answer as just to give a simple number, because if you stay with me throughout the video, you'll see what these variables are and what number might be right for you. But generally, they recommend that adults get about 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night, and by that measure, about 1/3 of us are
adolescents.
Sleep deprived. For adolescents or teens, that number is about 8 to 10 hours, and 2/3 of them are sleep deprived. But why is it that we have to sleep at all? In order to understand that, we need to know what happens in the different stages. So there's 4 stages, and in stage 1 and 2, the body is basically relaxing. It's getting into light sleep, getting us ready for the next stage. And stage 3 is called deep sleep or delta sleep. Delta is the slowest brainwave frequencies between 0 and 4 hertz. And something very interesting happens here. This is where we get our periodic bursts of growth hormone. And growth hormone, as the name says, it's to grow things, it's to repair things. And one thing it repairs is our DNA. Down at the cellular level, we're repairing this really important stuff. And we're also making immune cells to clean out debris and pathogens and even cancer cells. Stage 4 is probably what most people have heard of, the REM sleep, rapid eye movement. And this is because we're dreaming. So we're not as relaxed. The brain is actually increasing in activity. Our heart rate and breath rate increases because we're processing information. And we are also a little bit paralyzed, because when we're dreaming, we're often trying to act out these things that happen, these events. And if we didn't paralyze the muscles, then we'd be flailing around all night long. And the reason we're doing this dreaming and we're going through this process is, here is where we're converting our events, the events from the past day, we turn them into long-term memories. We're processing and integrating them so that we can make sense of it and store it long-term. And if we get 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep, then we will cycle through these different stages several times. So stage 1 and 2 is basically just relaxing. Our brains, our hearts, our breath, our muscles relax and slow down. Stage 3 is where we have our physical healing at the cellular level. We're repairing and fixing stuff. And stage 4 is for the mental aspect. And this is where our mental capacity changes, which we'll talk about. If we go long enough without sleep, we basically go crazy. And the hardest thing about poor sleep is that it kind of becomes a catch-22. So if we have this ease or stress or imbalance in the body, then that causes poor sleep. So we can't sleep as well. But then when we don't get enough sleep, based on what we just talked about, now we also don't get the rest. We don't process the information. We can't heal the cells. So it becomes a vicious cycle. And one of the reasons I talk so much about stress and stress responses is that it's tied to everything, and it fits right in here as well. Because once you have a stress response, you make different hormones. And one of the stress hormones is called cortisol. And cortisol will effectively shut down melatonin. And melatonin is the hormone that helps you sleep, that regulates your sleep cycles. But anytime that you have stress, you increase cortisol and you decrease melatonin. So here is part of that vicious cycle and why we have to control stress to get to the bottom of this. So when we don't sleep, after about 18 to 24 hours of staying awake, obviously you will notice some fatigue, but you also will see a decrease in alertness. You see a decrease in concentration. You'll see a worsening in reaction times. And your quality of life will start to go down as well. You won't appreciate things. You won't have the same sense of humor. You can't appreciate funny things or the joy in life. And if you wake up in the morning after less than 6 hours of sleep, then you will experience a lot of these same things. Now, some of you may have noticed that a lot of these things are similar to what happens when you're drunk from alcohol intoxication. So if we compare those symptoms, the decrease in performance from sleep deprivation to those of intoxication, and we look at the alertness and the reaction time, then after only 18 hours of staying awake, you have about the same performance as someone who has a blood alcohol level of 0.05%. And if you're in Europe or a lot of other places, they don't measure percent, they measure per mil, which is thousands. So that would be 0.5 per mil. And this is already legally drunk in most countries. If you stay awake for 24 hours, now you double that level to 0.1% or 1.0 per mil. And now you're legally drunk in every country in the world, and it is criminal and punishable by imprisonment in many places. Now, in many places, like Sweden, where I'm from, it's even stricter than that. So at 0.02%, you will get fined. At 0.03, you can lose your license or will lose your license. And at 0.1, it is a criminal offense, and you can get put in prison whether there was an accident or not. And the reason I bring this up is that Sweden, who has really gone after them,
single day I'm heading off to my dream, and I get everything that I damn well please. I don't give a damn if you all listen to me, cause I'm running. I'm the only one that really want it. I'm the only one that's really got it. I'm just being honest. I'm just doing everything I promise, cause I want it bad enough that I'ma make it as an artist. And I know I'm not the smartest, and I know I'm not the largest, but I promise you that I'ma be the one that worked the hardest, cause I promise you that I'm just getting started. And I promise you that my skills are getting sharper, so I'ma get charted. Can't be guarded. Nah, I'm the one that get retarded. Get the party started. Yeah, get the party started. Yeah, so let me get up on it. Yeah, bitch, you got me fucked up. I don't know what's up. Pour that shit in my cup. We bound to turn up. Quick this shit up so loud. In front of a whole crowd. We lose control now. Take this shit too personally. Everybody got a different version of me. Everybody gotta be learning from me. Everybody gotta be like there's uncertainty and
Yeah.